Welcome into the Faceless Truth Reactions. If you like what you see, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. It helps us grow a lot. Now, let's get on with the show.
Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Campagno, here with my co-hosts Kayleigh McEnany and Harris Faulkner. And also joining us today, Fox News contributor Lisa Booth and Fox News contributor Guy Benson. Now we begin with the southern border crisis and how America's heroes are now paying the price. The New York Post was the first to report that homeless veterans are being kicked out of hotels in upstate New York in an effort to make room for more migrants. A local nonprofit says 20 homeless and vulnerable veterans were displaced in total, with 15 of them being evicted from a single hotel. Our veterans, the brave men and women who risked their lives to keep America free, now being kicked to the curb because of the disaster unfolding on our border? New York Assemblyman Brian Mayer calls it a complete embarrassment.
The Biden administration, Governor Hochul, and the city of New York, they all have a part in this. And it's a total embarrassment. It's a slap in the face to veterans, to citizens of New York and this country who are really being cast aside to allow for asylum seekers to come here. At the end of the day, when it comes to this particular situation, you had combat veterans who are homeless, who were told to get out of their hotel after one day. Sharon and her team scrambled to find them locations, and right now what we've tried to do is let those veterans know we appreciate them. We're embarrassed by what's happened to them, but we have their backs.
Kayleigh, contrast that with what Secretary Mayorkas said this weekend, where he said, well, we've been planning for this transition for months. Slap in the face indeed.
No, you haven't been planning for this for months, clearly. I mean, and these are our nation's heroes. These are our veterans. These are the best among us who deserve a helping hand. They put their lives on the line, and now they're getting kicked out of hotel rooms. And I can't help but notice the contrast when you have a 24-year-old, a veteran, had been in Afghanistan, kicked out of his hotel room as an Afghan national on the terror watch list is crossing the border in San Diego. So you're an Afghan national on the terror watch list, just scurry across our border, no big deal. We'll let you in. But the guy who fought in Afghanistan will kick you out of your hotel room. The media, though, they are so culpable in this. The Washington Post, the big headline was "No surge." And then you read down 5 paragraphs down in the article, and even they admit unlawful crossings top 10,000 a day here, highest levels ever. Highest levels ever, and your headline is "No surge." That just defies common sense, Washington Post.
That's right. Harris, you had a phenomenal interview last hour on the Faulkner Focus with veteran Johnny Joey Jones. We'll play a clip for the audience in case they missed it earlier. We don't have that clip for you, but he spoke so eloquently and passionately about his service and the travesty that this represents. And he said, especially in a state like New York, how is it that they can't get their act together, essentially, with the tax dollars that we all pay to care for 15, 20 vulnerable veterans, and instead contrast that with the scramble, as the congressman articulated earlier?
Well, politics come into play here, and maybe money. One of the things we looked at last hour was the fact that it takes about $88 to really care for those veterans at a hotel, or anybody at that hotel in upstate New York. And what we found out was that the city was paying about $190 per illegal immigrant. So there might be a little cash. We can't prove that, but you can do the math. You can figure it out on your own. I think that really the rub here is what Representative Byron Donalds and others are pointing to on the Republican side, and that is the fact that there is an initial crime that people have committed coming across. And he and others in the party say Immigration and Customs Enforcement should be able to go out and arrest individuals for the simple reason that they are here illegally. And then you wouldn't have these collision problems at shelters and so on and so forth. In one shelter in the state of Texas, in one shelter where they were meant to hold about 90 people in a room, 400 were in that room. And the shelter itself meant to hold 1,000, 3,000 were at that shelter. And I pointed out, I mean, there's a whole lot of just heartbreak and what are they going to eat? Where are they going to the bathroom? What is that like? But at the same time, if there are people among them that we literally cannot vet, they're the gotaways who decided to get some shelter instead because the weather was bad. If we can't do our part in protecting the sovereignty of our nation against those who might be among the groups of people who are well-meaning coming here, then we're all in a world of hurt. because we can't really send anybody back effectively. So Donald's and several others, let me look, Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania, Mark Green of Tennessee, they want to put something in place right now that gives us expulsion in addition to Title VIII.
Right, and that's an excellent policy articulation that would help stymie this flow. And I just want to underscore, because with your articulate, it really just paints this vivid portrait of the abject, appalling nature of these conditions that we are subjecting these people to. And yet, according to this administration, we are the land of plenty. We are the administration of compassion. But the reality is anything but. Now, my team tells me that we have that SOT available. I do want to make sure that Johnny Joey Jones' voice is heard. It's an important point of view that he has. And let's play it right now.
They know the veterans they're helping are on the precipice of turning their life around.
Wow.
And these are American citizens who have paid taxes, and even if they're not in a good place right now, will one day. We don't know that the people they're putting in their place will ever even become citizens or contributing members of our society. If you're going to have to choose one desperate person over another, choose the ones you're already helping who have served this country. It's not to say these migrants don't deserve any help as human beings, regardless if they've broken the law. It doesn't mean that they don't deserve food, room, and board, but this is a city of 8 million people. I think they can figure it out when that community is struggling to take care of 20 veterans.
And the point here, Guy, is that for some reason, under this administration, it's an or. It's we care for the migrants or we care for homeless veterans, right? Instead of being put in a position, according to Mayorkas, again, he's been planning this for months, why couldn't it be an and? Why then couldn't our policy and our resources reflect a commitment to and?
Yeah, and there were stories relatedly over the weekend about how there were multiple weddings of American citizens disrupted, where contracts were just breached. And they said, sorry, your hotel guests can't stay here anymore. We're bringing in illegal immigrants. I mean, that's the type of thing that I think will tick off a lot of Americans, not just hardcore border hawk conservatives. What are the priorities here? And what's, I think, especially astounding is to see the president and his DHS secretary taking a victory lap over the weekend about the border crisis. It is absolutely wild. If they want us to believe that they've implemented a new strategy and it's working, and it's true, Bill Malugin has said on our air that border crossings between ports of entry have fallen dramatically in the last couple days. If their argument, and it's much more complicated than this, the reality is that, look, we did something and it's working, good for us, then you have to ask the obvious question that follows: why on earth did you not do that 2.5 years ago?
They didn't do it.
2.5 years and 6.5 million crossings ago.
Right. In Texas, which is where most of the drop, and we can't fact check that until later this afternoon when we see the actual numbers. So when they say 50%, I need to see that. I need to know that that's true. It would not be out of the bounds of thinking because the weather was horrific. However, a rancher I talked to last hour said the weather didn't stop anybody where he was down in Eagle Pass, the Rio Grande sector. Thousands are still coming through. So depending on where you were, maybe it made a difference. But the other thing is in Texas along the border, look at what the governor did.
Right.
He put up all that wire. He kept people out. The federal government didn't do that. They defied him.
But it's important to figure out the why. Like, I'm always trying to figure out the why. Why is this happening? Why is Joe Biden doing this? Because it is intentional. And I believe the bottom line is you had talked about sovereignty, but that's not something that Joe Biden is concerned with because he's a globalist. I mean, he is more concerned about the needs of the UN, about the World Economic Forum, than he is about his own American citizens. I mean, he had an initiative called Build Back Better World. Why are we interested in building the world better when our own country is falling apart? And you can see this in reality in the way that it's happening with displacing our combat veterans for illegal immigrants. You had a group of citizens in Chicago, a bunch of black residents in the South Shore, Chicago, doing a protest, suing, saying, why are we not being taken care of? Why are we putting the needs of illegal immigrants ahead of American citizens? And so if you're the Republican nominee, there's a real opportunity to paint that sharp contrast. And you had mentioned, why isn't the and important? Well, I believe America first, right? The and is not important until we focus on our own citizens, because we're going to keep losing as a country until we put our needs first, until we care about sovereignty, until we are most concerned with building our own economy, our own country back before we're interested in the needs of anyone else. But that is not the objective of this administration, and that is why everything is falling apart.
Right. And reminder that every time the president ends a prepared speech, he always ends it with "God bless our troops." I guess that ends essentially when they come
Well, he
back
doesn't mean it.
after
Look at
service.
Afghanistan.
Right? And look at this policy. All right, coming up, President Biden being accused of stoking the flames of racial division once again, this time during a college commencement speech.
President Biden promised to be America's uniter-in-chief. We heard him repeat it time and time again during his 2020 campaign and when he first took office. But now the president is once again facing fierce backlash for making divisive comments, sending this message in his commencement address to the graduating class at a historically black school, Howard University, over the weekend.
Stand up against the poison of white supremacy, as I did my inaugural address, to single out as the most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy. And I'm not saying this because I'm at a black HBCU. I say it wherever I go.
The most dangerous terrorist threat to the homeland, Harris. That's quite a claim.
You know what? He needs the numbers to back that up. And so we were looking at this issue today. And, you know, one of the problems with this is that he thinks because he is in front of a black audience that he can just say whatever he wants. I don't ever remember him saying with such specificity any of this in front of a white audience. But maybe we missed that day. Maybe it happened in Delaware on one of those mystery weekend getaways. But this is really important because there is domestic terrorism in our country, and you can look at the facts and see where that's coming from. You can also say that two things are true. Things can be a problem without being the number one or the only problem. But right now, our sovereignty is at stake. Right now, people are still fighting high prices of things. Like we're in the midst of history making for all the wrong reasons. The blacks in that audience care about that. You don't think that we care about the
100%.
economy?
Of course.
I mean, come on, you don't have to victimize us to reach us, but that's what he does. No one's putting us in chains.
That's a great point. And look, Guy, politically, he has to shore up his numbers among black voters, among young people. He was polling at about 90%, according to the Associated Press, with black voters. Now it's 60%. He has a big problem here.
58?
Perhaps he might have to go back to the well and suggest that if you are a person of a certain skin color who doesn't support him, you're not really black. Remember that?
Yes.
From 2020,
Yeah.
You brought that up in the last hour, Harris. I'd forgotten about that quote briefly. You raised it. I'm like, oh, yeah, he did say that. I think that's a window into his mentality. Not necessarily into his heart, but into the way that his political brain works and what he's trying to do.
That's fair.
And speaking of pandering, let me just throw this right back to you. When he said, I'm not saying this because I'm here, I'm saying this everywhere I go.
Where?
Yeah, is that not a pander to that specific audience?
I think it sits next to it on like the digital Websters, maybe. Like that is exactly a pander. And when he says, I'm not just saying that to blacks at an HBCU, I'm just thinking, does he not know the B in HBCU stands for black? Like, why are you saying it twice? Like, you're really double selling this. You're really trying to put this out there. And by the way, there are a lot of people who teach at HBCUs. Who knows who was in that audience?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know. In my own household, there are people who look like you. So I'm just wondering, and I'm pointing to Guy in case you didn't see that.
Good-looking household.
Yeah, well, I think he's cute myself. My kids are cute. But my point with this is that if you wouldn't say it to everybody, why are you only saying it to a certain audience?
Yeah.
Why?
It makes no sense. And Emily, there is this small matter that he promised us unity. Take a listen.
Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. To restore the soul and secure the future of America requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. With unity, we can do great things. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. Unity, not division.
People.
Right.
Yeah. Emily.
Yeah, I think his commitment to unity lasted the end of that sentence because we've seen nothing but divisiveness and exactly the kind of stoking and incendiary rhetoric coming from him this entire time. I thought that speech was fantastically degrading. It is so degrading to paint a portrait based on an assumption of the box checked by everyone sitting there and their families, and essentially that there is apparently zero drop of anything else impacting those families, that the most important thing facing them is this enemy. And that will somehow define their trajectory, define their existence by the existence of something else. I know when I graduated college in my commencement speech, I was looking for inspiration. I would think for my president, I would be looking for policy. I would want to know exactly how my community could be lifted up, how that tide rises to lift up all boats, the kind of things where when I walk out of there, I feel more educated, more inspired, more equipped for my divine assignment. Instead, after that, I would feel victimized, I would feel afraid, I would feel judgmental and critical of my neighbor based on a box they checked. This commander-in-chief is anything but a unifier, and that speech was appalling.
Well, Lisa told me during the commercial break she was really feeling unity in Joe Biden's America.
I was saying it as a joke, as we all know. He's the most divisive president, in American history, but the point is to pit neighbor against neighbor, people against the other. That is the point of this. Like every Marxist before him, you have to have someone to blame. You have to intentionally divide society. He did this during COVID with the unvaccinated like me, trying to say, hey, don't spend Christmas with your unvaccinated family member. They're dangerous. They're unclean. He did this heading into the midterm elections with Ultra MAGA, standing with the military flanked behind him, labeling 75 million Americans as enemies of the state. And now he's just doing it with white people. And the sad part is, and the irony of it, is that Joe Biden has probably made some of the most racist statements of any president in American history, whether it was palling around with segregationists, whether it was saying that Obama was the first black American who's bright, articulate, and clean, whether it was saying he didn't want his kids to grow up in a racial jungle, whether it was saying that you have to have an Indian accent to go into or work at a 7-Eleven or go into a 7-Eleven, whichever it was.
Offensive.
So, so he has actually made blatantly racist statements, but then he has the audacity to sit there and intentionally divide Americans because guess what? Rome is burning and the country is a mess, and he's trying to prevent a distraction and have a group of people for everyone to blame for their problems.
And by the way, just very quickly, you can absolutely say, and we should, that white supremacy exists. It is a fringe. It is a scourge, and it's evil.
Racism goes on all sides.
I'm just saying.
So I feel like that's also devaluing
fair enough,
the fact that racism is
But I'm saying this about white
everywhere.
supremacy specifically, Lisa. At the same time, he gave that speech in Washington, D.C., and it is laughable that the biggest threat to anyone in that city is white supremacy right now. And there is a lack of self-awareness on that point as well.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and I would love to have him focus on the terrorism in our nation's schools that we talk about each and every day.
There you go.
All right, coming up, why women are among the fastest growing group of gun owners in the country. That's next.
Women are among the fastest growing group of gun owners in America. Fox News Digital visited an all-female firearm training camp to find out why they're arming up.
This class is a very beginner's safety class, and it's ideal for the person who's afraid to shoot, and it gives them a little bit of opportunity. They spend 1 to 2 hours in the classroom. We like to answer all their questions, and then we come to the range and give them a sample of how to shoot.
Solid. Very good.
I'm Jane Melhans, and I am the firearm instructor today and also on the board of Washington State Rifle and Pistol as the government affairs person. Women are the fastest growing group of gun owners in America. A lot of that has to do with the increase in crime, especially in our area in Washington State, where the crime rates are real high, especially here in the Puget Sound. So safe direction and not putting your finger on the trigger, you won't have this gun going off by itself. So I give up my time to help women so that they can safely protect themselves. The modern sporting rifle can adjust to fit our smaller frames. There's little recoil compared to the other rifles, and so it makes it safer for a woman, both in a home defense situation or if they're shooting on Rifle League or something like that.
This bill prohibits the sale, import, distribution, or manufacture of any military-style assault a weapon in the state of Washington starting today. I'm happy to say that.
They're targeting the wrong person. They're targeting us, the law-abiding firearm owners, instead of the criminals, because criminals will get their firearms. They don't care about the laws. There's already over 88 pages of laws in Washington State and 237 on the federal level. And criminals will buy their rifles through black market, drug deals, straw purchase, whatever, illegal means, and so the law won't impact them. But for a lot of women, it's taken away the personal protection option of choice that works best for them. And, you know, so the law is clearly discriminating against women.
That was really fascinating, learning all of that.
Fascinating. And I think what this comes down to is, especially we mothers, we want to protect our little loved ones, our sons, our daughters. And when you read articles like response times in certain cities, 1.5 to 2 minutes, you're on hold to even get someone on the phone with 911. Guess what? It's on me. I have seconds if someone breaks into my house to protect my little babies. So these women, I'm proud of them for standing up, taking their protection into their own hands, because in this day and age, you've got to. You have to, right?
So what do you make of this new law in that state that says, and we think it's only new purchases. I mean, can you imagine if they went to women's houses and took their guns away? That'd be on the front page of every paper, I would hope.
Right.
Maybe some wouldn't.
You deserve the right to protect yourself. And if a woman feels more comfortable having a firearm inside her home to protect her little babies, she should be able to do that.
So, Guy, talk to me about the Second Amendment and what they're doing in that state and potentially others.
Well, I think that will face a legal challenge, obviously. And a state law cannot infringe on a fundamental right. So I think we'll probably see a lawsuit, and I would not be shocked if laws like that make it up to the U.S. Supreme Court. Anecdotally, I will say, the stats that we saw in that package about women being the fastest growing group of gun owners, that is reflected in my life among my friends, especially since 2020 and the chaos of that summer. That was an inflection point for a lot of women in my life who went from not really sure, a little bit squeamish about guns to, I don't have a choice anymore. We're arming up, we're getting trained, we're figuring it out, because it's an equalizer. And in a lot of, far too many places, women in particular don't feel safe because they aren't. Not as safe as they should be. And so they're taking matters into their own hands, and they have the right to do that in this country.
You know what's interesting about what Guy's pointing to, where women feel, that's what the administration of Biden is not picking up on. They look at things and they say, oh, the economy's doing this, and crime is coming down in this one category because we've, you know, redesignated things from misdemeanors on down and blah, 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 blah. And women and men, but particularly women, are saying they don't feel safe.
Yeah, but you know, Joe Biden wants to ban guns for nefarious reasons, because just like every authoritarian, a disarmed population is easier to control, and so that's the overall objective of Joe Biden and the left. Look, I'm a gun owner. It's for personal safety. I like the idea of being able to take my own fate into my own hands and not be relying upon the police or anyone else to come and save me and to help me out. I did have my carry. Now you don't need it in Florida because we have constitutional carry. So I understand why women want to own guns. You know, we live in an increasingly unsafe world. You pay attention to the news, you see in these neighborhoods that, you know, terrible things are happening and people just don't feel safe. I've also shot AR-15s. They don't have recoil. And so I could see as a woman why you would want one. A little harder to carry in your purse, you know? but I can see why women would want to own an AR-15.
And it also fits smaller frames. There's a whole host of reasons why that's the preferred firearm for a lot of women. And to that point, you know, it's not an equalizer, however, when the laws all of a sudden ban the manufacture, import, and sale. And anecdotally, so many of these comments I thought were fascinating, because these women are saying, nothing prevents a criminal from criming. Nothing prevents a criminal from getting these guns illegally. All this law prevents is from law-abiding citizens from protecting themselves. What has changed, everyone, in the last couple years that has spiked female gun ownership? It is that crime is now not only at their doorstep, it is in their doorstep. And when you read all of these stories and these anecdotes about these women who say, when my husband is not home, I no longer have a dog, when I am home alone with my children, etc., and there is a rash of carjackings, a rash of home break-ins, a rash of violent crimes in my neighborhood, in my neighbors, That is why they want a gun in their home, because crime is no longer in the bad areas or on the subway. It is in everyone's doorstep. And because the police are not able to protect us because they've been underfunded and undersupported by this administration, it is now up to Americans' hands. And yes, women will protect themselves.
But the sad thing is, real quick, now the left also wants to make self-defense illegal. So not only do they want to disarm you, then they're releasing criminals and ceding the streets to criminals, but then they also want to make it illegal to defend yourself, as we're seeing with Daniel Penny. So sad.
All right, coming up, the stunning number of young people who, if they had to choose, would give up the right to vote for the right to post on social media.
Well, the right to vote is a fundamental freedom here in the United States. Many people in countries around the world do not have that same freedom, nor did many Americans in centuries past. The women's suffrage movement, for example, took nearly 100 years to win the right to vote for women in this country. Back in 2005, we saw these images of people in Iraq proudly displaying their blue-stained fingers, showing they had voted in the country's first free national election in decades after the fall of Saddam Hussein. And we saw the same images out of Afghanistan when Afghans defiantly went to the polling stations even after the Taliban cut off fingers of at least 2 people who dared to vote. That is how important the right to vote has been for people in America and around the world. Yet a new survey found this. It's shocking. Nearly 60% of young adults with TikTok accounts said that they would give up the right to vote before the right to post on their social media accounts. Lisa, I can't even believe it. It says everything, just that stat.
I know. I don't want those people voting. Can we make it so those people can't vote? I mean, look, the country is a mess right now. And I was seeing the nation's report card history scores are the lowest ever recorded since 1994 and that. So obviously people, but I think that's also with intention. I mean, I think there's a real intent not to educate children because it's easier to indoctrinate them. And that's what we're increasingly seeing. Because even if you look at COVID, there was a real lack of critical thinking. And so I think children are actually intentionally being taught to not be critical thinkers. They want them to be dumb and stupid and more easily susceptible to indoctrination.
Well, Vivek Ramaswamy, I asked him Friday night, your proposal to take away the voting rights for those under 25, with some exceptions, might not be too popular among young people, but it appears I'm wrong. They might be just fine with it, Emily.
Yeah, that show was awesome, Kaylee. So was that interview. I will say that, I agree with you that this just reflects that social media it's such an opiate. It's a sedative. It's an addiction. That's why these kids, they have zero respect for and appreciation for how sacred voting is. And those of us, you read in that intro what a sacred right it is. And when people get it in other countries that haven't had it for their lifetime, it's really incredible. And people walk miles to do so. People feel so honored at that opportunity to vote in a free election. Because, by the way, the other half of the world, many of their elections don't have a result that you can have faith in. And so here I think that it's just a gross reflection of this indoctrinated culture, this sedated culture where these kids have instant gratification. And that is being fostered by schools and these parents that have no idea about it. Instead of saying, hey, here's how you critically think, and here's the difference, by the way, between a right and a luxury, a right and a privilege. The right to vote, that is sacred. Everything else is a joke.
I like sedated.
Yeah.
Maybe I like that. That's a good word choice.
And Harris, the New York Post, they put up this quote, and I think it so pertains to this story from President Reagan. All great change in America begins at the dinner table. That may be the solution.
I love that. So yeah, you've got to keep people who have each other's best interests at heart around each other. That's how we build each other up and make for that wider high tide that lifts all boats. We've got to start at home. But then home has to be a place where you feel like you're seen and you're heard. Mm-hmm. And that's difficult right now. I mean, when you look at the numbers of domestic violence and the such. So it's tough. It's not impossible, but it's tough. Prayer helps. So I would say this. I'm a little soft-hearted when it comes to these people because I understand that they don't really know who they are. Mm-hmm. And they don't realize in this country that one vote can matter. They don't believe in it anymore. And I put some of that at the feet of the politicians because they haven't made us feel like when they say something, they're going to do that same thing that they say. Often enough that our next generations obviously feel it matters if they vote. However, they are narcissistic enough to think that their one voice might make all the difference on social media. Right. And unless they're Elon Musk and a few others, I don't know if that's true. But education does change it. Lisa's right.
And Guy, China, I'm not going to separate them out of this because we know the influence they have on TikTok, and that's indoctrinating these young people. And meanwhile, China TikTok, it's patriotism. It is encouraging voting. It's
and
totally
educational
different.
tools and
Yes.
that sort of thing. I mean, when I first saw the story, like Lisa, it's like, okay, so you've got Gen Zers in particular who'd be willing to sacrifice their right to vote in order to keep posting on social media. And sort of jokingly, my response is, your terms are acceptable. I'm okay with that. But look, this is America. They don't have to choose, thank goodness. They can do both. And just to push back, and maybe I'm wrong about this, I was thinking when I was in, let's say, middle school or high school, where all, like, the rage was AOL Instant Messenger, which I was not allowed to be on, but many were. I wonder if you posed the exact same question to 17-year-old me and my friends back then. You give up that, you give up video games, or you vote. I wonder if the numbers look all that much
vote
different.
at 17.
Well, but like moving forward in the future, like, would you rather continue to do this thing that you really like in exchange for your vote? I think a lot of people might go that direction.
Yeah,
I don't
well,
know.
I would increase the voting age then. I don't know.
I was on AIM Instant Messenger, like chatting it up with boys, but I can tell you I never would have exchanged
boy.
that.
Really? Go
My
on,
right to
wow.
vote. That was like, yeah, young 14-year-old Kaylee. All right, coming it up, why is the cost of the cheapest Taylor Swift ticket right now the same as some mortgage payments? That's next.
It seems Taylor Swift fans have no problem paying a high price to see her live. Her Eras tour is smashing attendance records and on pace to be one of the highest grossing tours ever, with estimates suggesting it could net the pop star more than $1 billion in revenue. Tickets for nosebleed seats, in fact, for next weekend show in Massachusetts will set fans back more than $1,200 on StubHub. And while the most expensive ticket at her show in New Jersey at the end of the month was going for more than $11,000 as of Sunday afternoon. Well, I'm glad I got my girls tickets early because this was Bella's 16th birthday present. It's an important year in her young life. But it's all the girls talk about. Like, we're at dinner and, Mom, did you hear that she's like shouting out to her fans and protecting them from the police and the guards? And I'm like, yes, I'm in the news. Of course I heard. Yes. But we hear it all the time. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. My sister went, not a big Taylor Swift fan. You know, I've said I'm not a huge fan. But my sister went and she said within moments, I was just totally magnetized by it. She said, I was like, why? She said she was extremely authentic with the way she would interact with the crowd from the stage. Her music, too, it's authentic. It's genuine. She sings to the heartbreaks and love stories we all as women deal with. So something about her is just connecting in a big and profitable way for Taylor Swift.
Well, I got to tell you, Guy, you can buy a lot of tickets, see a lot of concerts, and not see one person perform 44 songs like Taylor Swift.
Yeah, people getting their lots of money worth, I guess, with these very long sets that she's playing. And from what I've heard from friends who have gone, it's like a really good show. And if you want to know why tickets are so expensive, I mean, it's a basic supply and demand, but when you have the extremely powerful alliance of teenage girls and gay men all wanting something, the prices are going to go way up. Right? That is just basic economics.
I have to let you speak for both.
Well, I don't know much about teenage girls. But I'll toss that back over to you as the mother of it.
I'll check in with Bella and Danica on that.
Exactly.
Back to you, Harris. Lisa?
I hate that I like her music because she's such a lib, so I want to hate it. But I find
Oh my goodness.
But like when I hear it, I'm like, oh, you know, it's like catchy. But like 11,000. I don't like anyone that much to spend that much money on anything unless it's like family or someone I really, really love. But that's like 3+ months of rent. That is absolutely insane. And you had mentioned Sweet 16. I just popped in my head. My dad took me to New York City for my Sweet 16th, and I remember being Times Square, and I'm like, this is awesome. I'm gonna move to New York. Times Square is the best. And then when you move here, you're like, Times Square is the worst place ever. Avoid it like the plague. But
especially
I don't know,
at night.
Just like, yeah.
I'm just, Emily, really glad we got these tickets like many months ago, before the scandal even, with the whole ticketing thing.
Totally, and I love it. It's so sweet to me. Like what a sweet 16 gift that you've given your daughter. I know that's going to be an amazing evening. I will say for me personally, I would rather be anywhere than at that concert for all of the reasons that were just articulated. And look, I'm all for capitalism, of course, but I wonder in those seat prices, let's break it down. Remember the TLC Behind the Music, which was the best one of all time, where they say for every dollar spent, here's exactly how much of it goes to the radio execs or the record execs, record company execs. How much goes to the talent? How much goes to insurance for these big venues, how much, et cetera. So sort of let's dig into, and if she's making $1 billion, yeah, good on her. But she's also one that has said that she's committed to service and helping others. So I wonder if I was an artist, how do you have a free show? Maybe. Remember during the pandemic when there was so much online content that people could sort of digest from their home couches, and they still make a lot of money, and then it would be accessible to everyone, because I can't imagine her liking the fact that only her rich fans can attend, or only the ones that got the tickets early.
She is a liberal,
yeah, if you get your tickets early and you sit in the nosebleeds like we're going to do.
Yes.
The popcorn tastes great up there, by the way.
I just bought concert tickets the other day. Billy Joel, because I am 65 years old.
He's great at the Garden.
Oh, he's
I took
fantastic.
my husband. That was what he wanted.
We should go together.
Yeah, for sure. The one in the
Country music. Maybe someone will go with.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Zach
Well,
Bryan.
when Morgan is
George
back on
Strait.
stage,
Zach Brown?
Yes.
Morgan
Or
Wall,
Zach- no, Zach-
I would love to
Zach
go see
Bryan,
him.
the country
This
guy.
has devolved.
More outnumbered.
Yeah, now we're just
having our own thing.
Last but not least, Sports Illustrated, famous for its iconic swimsuit covers over the years, is making headlines and history with its latest edition. At 81 years old, Martha Stewart has become the oldest cover girl to pose for the publication. She says she wants to show that a woman her age can still look and feel good. Harris, I think she looks fantastic.
I love that you came to me first because I'm 57. I'm the oldest one on the couch.
No, I just think she looks amazing.
If you have it, rock and roll.
Absolutely. Right, Kaylee?
Absolutely. No, I think this is great. Celebrating women, you don't have to be a perfect, model in your 20s. She looks beautiful. She looks great. I'm all for it. Go
And
Sports
she looks
Illustrated.
happy.
Am I the only hater?
does.
I'm going to be a hater. I'm not down with it. Like, she's 80. Are we going to put, like, 90-year-olds in the cover? Like,
Sure,
it's like,
why not?
It's like putting obese people
I
on
know
the cover.
30-year-olds who don't look that good.
My Mimo looked
No,
great
but
in a bathing suit.
I'm not
and she was
down
so
with
proud
it.
of it.
I just look, I don't want to give young girls complexes, so I understand that we don't want to feed unhealthy perceptions among young people. We also don't need to go nuts with it, right? It's like telling people that, like, Lizzo's healthy or something. I'm sorry, you're not. Like,
I
if I
would
could
compare
just say
Martha
this.
Stewart.
no, but it's just like
So,
it's like this whole movement of
my
like,
Mimo-
we have to have the oldest, we have to do
Interesting.
this, we have
I
to
love
do
it.
I don't know. I'm not down with it. I'm sorry.
I've got to say, my Mimo, she
Sorry,
was
Martha.
so excited to go to the pool in her elderly community. She's no longer with us. So we got her the most beautiful bathing suit. I still remember, black with these blue glowing flowers. And man, she looked good. Like,
See?
better in a bathing suit than me, I will say. Better.
You can be beautiful at any age, and she's celebrating that.
She's 81. I'm
Yes,
sort of
Guy,
just.
thank you.
No, but not in the way that you mean. Like,
I think Lisa's outnumbered.
you are outnumbered on this one. She looks really good. 81 years old. That sort of like
Okay.
blows me away. Good for her.
It was the tone. I thought you were with me. I thought I wasn't
I'm
going
sorry.
to.
It's a head
Outnumbered,
fake.
Lisa. Embrace it.
Then I'm a hater. You know what? I can stand alone. I'm comfortable.
No,
with
of
my own-
course,
my
of
own,
course. I wonder how they got her to do this, though. I mean, this is not, she's known for making the rest of us do stuff that makes the whole family feel good, food and whatever. I wonder if this was her jam. Maybe this was her idea.
Yeah, and I wonder too, to your point, would you feel better about this do you feel that Sports Illustrated is relegated to a certain look, and therefore if she was on the cover of maybe Women's Health or Town and Country, like you're okay with this, but just on a different medium?
Yeah, like there's this whole thing now, and she's actually, attractive, but there's this whole thing now where we're told that like beauty is someone who's like objectively not attractive, right? Like we're just in this like weird. I don't like the societal stuff that's
I
going on
think this is
right
tasteful.
now.
I think she looks
And
beautiful.
not her specifically, but we're told like hairy armpits is attractive. Like it's not. You know what I mean? Like I want to live in I just want to live in reality. That's all I want to do.
The good news is reality always resides here on this couch.
Nice transition, Emily.
We can't wait to hear your thoughts on everything we talked about. Don't forget to DVR the show when you can't watch us live. And now here's America Reports.
I love Lisa.